panelists then. Okay, I request Dr. Ritu Jain, Dr. Prabhat Bhargav, Dr. Neeraj Jain.
Yes.
Yes, thank you. Dr. Chandran Kushna Das, Dr. Pradeep Mondal, Kolkata, Chandigarh, Mumbai. We have from Amritsar, different places. Okay, are all of you there? Shall we quickly go through the case-based discussion?
Yes. Yeah.
Can we start?
Yeah. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, so that's the slide. So we'll just quickly go through, concentrating on few drugs, not the entire neutropenia. Okay, let's get started. So today we'll focus our discussion on this granulocyte macrophage colony stimulating factor, or GM-CSF, and the M-CSF. Now quickly to the panelists, how will you approach to a patient of neutropenia in your regular practice? How do you go about after giving the, how do you manage a patient?
Yeah. So,
open common question.
Yeah. So first, as the guideline says that we have to take that whatever the regimen we are giving, what is the potential of doing neutropenia in that regimen. Not only that, we have to check the patient performance status, his or her comorbidities, and so these things we have to consider. So definitely, first thing is that how is the potential of that regimen of doing creating neutropenia. So that there are three categories: high, intermediate, and low. We all know that. So we have to divide that, and we have to see the age of the patient, performance status over and above that regimen. So we'll choose according to that whether to give primary prophylaxis to that patient or not.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Pradeep. Anybody else wants to add? And having what he has said perfectly is what we do. Anything anybody wants to add before we move on to the next part?
I think if a patient with neutropenia, then you have to consider two things: the chemotherapy and the use of previous primary prophylaxis, and the present situation. Present situation is by MSSC risk factor, whether the patient is going to require the oral antibiotic or IV antibiotic, patient is stable it or not, depending on that. So the chemotherapy, primary prophylaxis, and patient factors, these are the three things we need to look for.
Yeah, thank you. Great. Both of you are exactly right on the dot. Okay, very important, the subsequent cycles, whether the patient has developed neutropenia, not neutropenia, and how do you proceed. And these are the key, all our panelists has told us, and the risk stratification, and it is a very, very important decision in treatment, because when we particularly go for adjuvant, we should not miss the patient for febrile neutropenia, and in all our centers, this rate should be very low. Now, coming to the quick question to all the panelists, before we move on to toxicity, see the slide, the use of GCSF recommended, not only NCC and all guidelines. So in your practice, what is your choice of the growth factors you use, and prophylactically how you use? Any one of the panelists?
So myself, we are commonly using that filgrastim. And we commonly choose because it's cheap, and so commonly we use filgrastim at the dose of 5 microgram per kg body weight. We can use from after 24 hours or even after 3 days post chemotherapy. So even we can choose pegfilgrastim also. So commonly we choose because pegfilgrastim is also cheaper nowadays. So 6 milligram fixed dose for an adult patient we can choose, or 100 microgram per kg. If it is, I usually don't give pegfilgrastim less than 6 years of old, but if it is a child and more than 6 years, then we can give 100 microgram per kg body weight after 12 hours, so from 12 hours post chemotherapy.
Yes. Okay. Anybody else who has not spoken among the panelists wants to tell something before we use? All of you use GCSF. How many people use GM-CSF? Dr. Ritu is there? Dr. Prabhat?
Yes, ma'am. We normally use GCSF only, and very frequently used PEG GCSF.
GNCSF.
GMCSF we have hardly used.
Okay, fine. And Dr. Neeraj is there?
Yes.
Okay. Dr. Neeraj? Okay. Now let's move on to the toxicities. Now, all of us have said that we get these type of toxicities with the, okay, what is the common toxicity that you see when you give this PEG GCSF or you give the simple filgrastim? And one of the Malanist already doctors told us that it is we use the generics. So commonly toxicity is encountered in these cases.
So commonly we are facing that flu-like reaction, and most important is patient usually complaints of back pain. So that is the two most common side effects I usually encounter, and I heard from our patients.
Yeah, Dr. Prabhat, you said rarely you use sargramostim. Any experience with the use of sargramostim?
Not much, just rarely we have used.
Yeah. Anybody else in the panel or in the audience or rather the viewers have used the sargramostim? Okay, fine. Let's move on to it. Correctly, the doctor, you have told usually most common is this bone pain. We did have some patient coming back for admission for bone pains also. Apart from this few allergic reaction, sometimes these are rare side effects which has been documented, but be very careful if the patient has immunogenicity or has vasculitis. Now, today we wanted to restrict our discussion to the use of GMCSF or MCSF. So this sargramostim, you avoid using if there is a cardiac, hepatic, renal, but that goes with all drugs. It's not that this drug has to be done. And it does also cause some flu-like reaction. It causes some myalgia and some diarrhea, skin rashes. Okay, but then they are all manageable toxicity. Okay, now nobody has used this drug. That's what you say, but I have just started using this drug, and the drug it is mainly it's mainly used for the allogenic and the allogenic transplant as well as the autologous transplant, and it can be used along with the filgrastim and also the pedisector, which is used for mobilization of the cells into the periphery prior to the harvest. Okay, and it is also used mainly in this scenario, autologous allogenic stem cell transplant mobilization. It is also used for as a prophylactic dose after AML induction in acute lymphoblastic leukemia. It's also used in myeloma and also in the post autologous hematopoietic stem cell transplant. So let's see some of the if you see the NCCN guidelines, the use of the GMCSF, you can give it along with filgrastim as well. Filgrastim and sargramostim can be given together. Quick words from the thought process. Do you think any scenario you would like to use this drug? Because if you see the guidelines, it is already there. Okay, and any thought process from the doctors? Whether you want to use concurrent or whether you want to use the single agent, where will you use?
I think the real value for sargramostim is the transplant mobilization, as I said earlier.
Yeah.
The other use I can say, if the patient is having thrombocytopenia to GCS or PEG GCS previously, then I can switch to sargramostim in a non-transplant setting. So the standard is for transplant is the sargramostim is a better options. Non-transplant should be GCSF or PEG GCSF.
Okay, so we want to restrict it completely to the mobilization of the hematopoietic progenitor cells in an autologous. But if you see the present guidelines 2020, leukopenia, okay, who did not receive prophylactic GCSF in the first cycle, the MGCSF or the myeloid growth factor is an indication, particularly when there is infected, complicated, or infection-associated complication. So again, quick opinion from our panelist. How do you? What is your thought process in this? This is there in the guidelines as I think category 1. And also it is used in hemoptytic acute radiation syndrome. This is an approved drug provided you were not exposed earlier and you had infection complications of febrile neutropenia. Okay, anybody wants to take before we move? What about Dr. Chandan Krishnadas?
Ma'am, if it's already received no prophylactic GCSF, then I would go for the standard GCSF, which would be a daily version. If it uses pegylated GCSF, sometimes it tends to use also in patient is deteriorating. I want to supplement with standard GCSF also. But previous pegylated GCSF, the GCSF levels are quite high if you measure actually. Actually, there is no need of giving GCSF after the around 7 to 10 days after pegylated GCSF.
Yes.
Though in our routine practice, we tend to give actually GCSF.
Yeah, you're right. Yes, exactly. That's one of the very important point. If you give a PEG GCSF, you don't need to give the other filgrastim, but then we give it when the patient gets admitted because that's not in the recommendation. So the NCCN recommends the evaluation of risk factor, the infection-related complication, particularly if you're elderly, if your ANC is low, you had a prolonged neutropenia, you have a pneumonia, you had evidence of fungal infection, had hospitalization earlier. This is a particular scenario. Apart from the hematological malignancies where you use it for mobilizing the marrow, this drug GM-CSF and the GM-CSF or sarcomestin has been approved in the guidelines to be used in cases of solid tumors. So we heard about our experience. Everybody said that there is minimum experience. I have just started using 1 or 2 patients recently for this indication. Now, do anybody wants to say something about this drug before we move on to the, because febrile neutropenia is a common discussion we regularly have with antibiotics, growth factors. So this is the different angle to the discussion, and we thought we'll have some thought process how to go about, because the drug is on the recommended panel. And how today's discussion is basically to see how we can extrapolate the recommendation and use in our Indian practice. Are we doing it? What are the hurdles and how to go forward? Quick comment from the panelists before we move to the anemia and cancer.
So that sarcomestin, this drug GM-CSF, I have seen that it is little scary that it has lots of side effects apart from the common group side effects of GCSF or GCSF. That even there are some hypertension, even hypotension, lots of other side effects, fluid retention, cardiac, even. So we have to use very cautiously these drugs. I think in hospital setting, definitely we can use that. But if we use in an OPD basis, I think that will be difficult because what about the side effects I have seen?
Yes, Dr. Pradeep, it is very well taken, and I think it's a good thought process. May not be able to use as an OP basis with the side effects. So let's summarize. It has been approved particularly in high risk febrile neutropenia when patient having the risk factors which I just pointed out, that is the myeloid growth factor. It can be GM-CSF or GCSF can be used to treat, and this is the HARS is the hemoptytic AR, that respiratory distress syndrome where there's lots of cytokines released into the individual. It has been approved and it causes mild myalgia, it causes facial puffing, it may cause fever, headache, nausea and dyspnea, and is commonly administered in a hematological transplant setting, either to mobilize or as a supportive care or as post-transplant. FDA has approved the biosimilars. And NCCN, that's the indication, which is the last slide in this half, where elderly patient with sepsis, prolonged admission, neutropenia, the GM-CSF should be considered, where the myeloid growth factor is comes into the play, and this drug has an approval as on 2020. So that's fine. We move forward because we need to know how the people take it. Few references are there in myeloid leukemia and the bone marrow transplant. Now, quick question to the panelists. Did the other panelists, Dr. Neeraj, Dr. Ritu, joined? How do you approach to a patient with anemia and cancer? If not, the other panelists can take the question, please.
As Jaya ma'am has already alluded to, first of all, I would like to rule out the nutritional deficiencies. And if it is not, then will it be a chronic anemia of chronic disease, or else if it is post chemotherapy, then we'll attribute to be related chemotherapy, and then accordingly treat it.
Yeah, definitely routine anemia of chronic disease has to be ruled out, like there any hemolysis, any nutritional deficiency, inherited renal dysfunction, and chemo, radiation, myelosuppression, hormone dysfunction, other evidence of chronic. Okay, so it's not so easy to manage this chemotherapy-induced anemia, and we have to give a holistic approach to them. Quick question back to the panelists. Doctors, when do you consider your patient for transfusion post chemotherapy coming with anemia?
So there is no hemoglobin cutoff for me at least to transfuse patient. So I have to see patient. I have to consider everything. What is the age of the patient? What is the comorbidities along with that anemia? What is the regimen and what is the expectation that how much anemic she will be when we start the chemotherapy. So everything I have to consider, and then so there is no cutoff for anemia, but most of the patients who are getting routine chemotherapy, I try to practice that when the hemoglobin is less than 7, then I transfuse. But I also consider that comorbidities and other organ dysfunction before transfusing.
Yeah, Dr. Different thought process, or you will manage it the same way?
The same way, actually. Any patient with symptomatic anemia,
excellent,
and this is the fastest way to achieve get rid of symptoms, the transfusion. So symptomatic anemia is the indication of RBC transfusion. That's very
excellent, and that gives you an excellent improvement in the quality of life. That before you discharge, the patient will be like so happy. So quality of life matters. Yes, doctors, symptomatic anemia is very important, and also asymptomatic anemia, but with underlying comorbidities, maybe a cardiac disease, pulmonary, cerebral, uncontrolled tumors. These are the two indications. But if your patient is asymptomatic and has no comorbidities, just observe. Now, next question to the panelists, Dr. Prabhat, Dr. Pradeep, and Dr. Chandan. Three of you, when do you give iron injections?
So my preferred iron supplement is iron injection for absolute iron deficiency. And those patients who is on the ESA or the darbepoetin or erythropoietin, they usually require iron deficiency because they tend to develop iron deficiency, which is functional. And NCCN clearly shows absolute iron deficiency and functional iron deficiency. These are the most common indications for IV anemia, IV iron therapy.
Okay. Anybody else wants to answer this?
Yeah. So that transparent saturation less than 20 is my cutoff, and along with that serum iron less than absolute iron less than 50, and transparent saturation less than 20% usually. I follow when we give the iron supplementation, and mostly, if possible, we give IV iron supplementation because most of the chemotherapy patients will have nausea, vomiting, and GI toxicity, GI problem. GI upset will be there, so I prefer not to give oral iron and.
So when the transparent saturation is less than 50, and also when the when your iron deficiency, there is no iron deficiency, that is the patients who don't need any, that's in the last group, they don't need any iron transfusion. But anywhere up above, everybody needs some IV iron along with the erythropoietin supplement. Now, which preparation of iron will you use commonly in your practice?
So ferric carboxyl maltose is the commonly used iron preparation. Since my TMH times, I used to see this, and now also I'm practicing giving this helicarboxymaltose, and preferably I give 500 mg if patient is less than 50 kg weight, and above 50 kg I will give 1 gram.
Okay. And what is your frequency of repeating the dose?
Yeah. So guidelines saying that you should repeat after 7 days, but most of the patients we can't give that so frequently. But I try to repeat in 1 month time. If still hemoglobin is.
The next chemo.
Yeah.
Okay. Apart from Dr. Pradeep, again back to Dr. Prabhat and Dr. Chandan. Have you used any other preparation apart from the ferric carboxymaltose?
If my patient is isolated pure iron deficiency, I sometimes use isomaltose, the ferric isomaltose, the isofer, only for the pure iron deficiency. But for others, the cancer-associated anemia, iron deficiency, I tend to use carboxymaltose also.
Okay. And Dr. Neeraj, I think, has joined. Dr. Neeraj, any thought process from your side?
I am using 1000 per week, and the patient is responding very well.
Okay, responding very well. Okay, Dr. Neeraj, quick question. Now, we have already heard when we are going to give the blood transfusion. Now, what is your cutoff for the erythropoietin stimulating agent? Whom will you use, or will you use along with the iron therapy?
So after 2 doses, the patient is not responding, then we should think of blood transfusions.
Yeah, no, my question is the erythropoietin stimulating agent. When will you be using the erythropoietin stimulating agent, ESA?
I am usually using along with iron in severe anemia cases, that is below 7, if the HB is below 7, I am using along with iron.
Okay, any other difference in opinion from the other panelists regarding ESA using? Do you use for all patients? Do you use every time with iron? Because we have already seen this chart where only the functional iron deficiency, they are saying to use it with the EPA.
I tend to use ESA or the darbepoetin for the anemia of chronic disease. So if iron is fine, I tend to use singly, but I have to monitor frequently the iron profile because they tends to develop the functional iron. Then I would add actually IV iron of anything.
Otherwise, cutoff dose for ESA is 9 grams per deciliter till 11 grams of deciliter.
Yes, 11 is the standard. So no need to exceed 11 because the chance of the thrombosis hypertension is much higher after 11.
Yeah, you should not cross 11, and between 9 to 11. And correctly, our panelist has said, I think Neeraj also said, all of you said that we alongside look for the iron deficiency anemia. If needed, supplement with the iron deficiency with the intravenous things. We also did the clinical trial on the iron drugs at India. Few of the references are, these are the study on ferric carboxymaltose and anemia associated with chemotherapy, and side effects are there. Be very careful. This also needs to be most important. Quickly, before I tell, a quick question to the panelist. What are the side effects that you see with these iron injections, and how careful are you be, and whether you can give it as an OP basis?
Ferric carboxymaltose, I think, is the safest, and I have not experienced any single episode of any reaction or anaphylaxis with that. So it's the safest preparation, and I prefer that. Any
comments from the other panelists before we wind off for today?
Apart from the allergic or the infusion reaction, the other side effects I must say is hypophosphatemia. But actually phosphate for the any patient who is an IV iron, and if you see week 2 or week 3, the maximum chance of peak hypophosphatemia, and it is much higher as compared to the isomaltose.
Yeah, and also one needs to be also careful that we don't get into an iron overload. Okay, look for the kidney, renal parameters, cardiac parameters, because this iron infusion causes ECG changes. But what correctly you have said, most important, an allergic reaction and subsequent doses leads to hypophosphatemia. Now, any other comments that the other panelists wants to make? regarding the two drugs or something which we have left out, or even I request the chairperson and the other speakers to chip in your comments before we wind up for today's case-based discussion.
I think the IV iron or evaluation of anemia is actually less. Actually, we actually doing much lesser as compared to others. We should do it more screen for the nutritional anemia, more frequently use of the iron supplement or oral iron, so that we actually improve the quality of life of cancer patients.
Correct. Yeah, I do agree with you, Dr. Chandan. It's a very important take-home message. We in our busy practice sometimes overlook the anemia. We are more interested in how to push the chemo drugs, but then this, what you said, is very important. The quality of life improves. Please give supplementary iron. Oral preparation may be difficult because of mucositis and lowered absorption, but definitely intravenous iron can be included into the chemotherapy schedule and repeated once in 3 weeks when we are giving. So once in a week may be difficult, and I rightly agree with you. It should be taken into consideration. And thanks to Jyoti for organizing. Supportive care in oncology is something very, very important. If you don't support them with the side effects, they'll just abandon you and not take the treatment. The entire survival, everything comes down. So if your patient is not reporting to the OPD. So thanks. I also love enjoying supportive care meetings. Thanks to everybody. And